Hello? Hello?
Very good morning to all the participants and our resource person, Professor Asif Iqbal. So, to begin with today's session, titled Towards Building an Empathetic Conversational System, I first like to introduce the resource person, Professor Dr. Asif Iqbal. We are happy to have you, sir, today with such a igniting profile, which I will be sharing with my participants. Professor Asif Iqbal is currently working in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at IIT Patna. He has been pursuing research in natural language processing, information extraction, text mining, and machine learning for the last 12 years. He has been authored around 160 papers in top-tier conferences like ACL, ENNLP, Polling, NACL, and journals like ACM Transactions, IEEE Transactions, etc. Asif sir has been involved in several sponsored research projects in the broad areas of NLP, AI, machine learning technologies, funded by different private agencies like Elsewhere, Accenture, EZDI, LG, Samsung Research, and SkyMap. Wipro and Flipkart are also some of them. The government agencies like MIT Government of India, MHRD, SERB Government of India, etc. He has been serving as an area chair, PC member, and as a reviewer in several well-known conferences like EACL 2021, NAACL 90 chair, senior PC member of IJACI, PC and review committee member of various conferences. He has he is the associate editor of 1 minute please. He has an associate or editor of Sadhana, Springer Nature Computer Science, Springer, and Machine Transaction Springer. He is an awardee of Best Innovative Project Award from the Indian National Academy of Engineering, Government of India. He also has JSPS Innovation Fellowship from Government of Japan and Young Faculty Research Fellowship Award of Government of India. Google Scholar Citation, which is the benchmark for computer science and engineering, shows 3,879 career citations to Dr. Asif's papers. His H index is 33 and ITEL index is 113. With such a wonderful profile, we welcome you all, sir, to this FDP on data sciences. Now I hand over the session to Asif, sir. So please.
Okay. Okay. So very good morning to all of you, and uh, thank you, Professor Tyagi, for the introductions. Maybe I'll share my screen and then we'll continue discussions. Okay, let me share the screen first. Okay, 1 second, please. It is happening. Okay, so is my screen visible?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Yeah, yeah, yes. Okay, so very good morning to all of you, and thank you once again for inviting me in this particular FDP. So I'll be talking about very interesting topic in nowadays in the area of artificial intelligence, natural language processing, machine learning, so text mining, data science. So it is a kind of multidisciplinary area, and the main problem is to build a conversational AI systems. Now I will introduce what we mean by the conversational AI systems, and the idea is to make it more empathetic. So empathetic means there are many human mental states, for example, that talks about the emotion, the sentiment. So how can you make a machine to understand the human emotions, human sentiment, and how a system can converse with the human? So that is what we mean by the empathetic conversational systems. So this is the outline of my talk. So briefly, I will let you know what we mean by the conversational AI. Then we'll introduce the empathy in the systems, conversational system, which is also known as the dialogue agents. Mainly, we'll talk about how to introduce the politeness or the courteousness, then the sentiment, emotions in the conversational agents. Then, how can we? There is another concept of personalization, so I'll talk about that. And then one is that multimodal response generation. If we get time, so I'll also tell you the challenges and the necessities of building a system that not only accept the written text as an input, but also can take the other sources of information like image, like audio, like video, etc. as an input, and then conclude. And finally, I will show you what at IIT Patna we are actually doing in these particular areas. Okay, so going forward, let us see what we mean by the conversational AI. So obviously, most of you might be aware about artificial intelligence, and this is one of the very, you can say that hot topic in today's world. Whether it is an academic researchers, whether it is a industry, whether it is computer science, whether it is related to mechanicals, whether there is in chemistry, let's say in the health sciences. So AI nowadays is extremely important, and it has opened up lots of opportunities to apply machine learning, to apply data science based techniques for solving many of the problems, okay, that always a human find difficult to solve in a time bound manner. So now when you talk about this AI, the concept of conversational AI, which is also, you can say, it is a kind of the conversation between the man and the machine, between the human and the machine. And this actually started in 1950, you can say, with the Turing test. Okay, Alan Turing, when he tested how a machine is lagging in intelligence compared to a human. So that was the test in 1950. So in 1950, the Alan Turing created a set of questions, and the questions were not the mathematical questions. The questions were the natural language questions. Because if you ask the questions mathematically to a human, probably they will not be able to understand, interpret it very easily. So the idea is that the question should be in the language that a particular person understands very easily. So what Alan Turing did is that he created a set of questions, and there was a systems machine, and the same set of questions were asked to a human. So a human produced the answers to these questions. Also, the machine produced the set of answers, and he tried to analyze the compare between the answers produced by a human and the answers produced by the machine. And then he came up with a lot of problems that the challenges that he tried to understand that how the answers retrieved by a systems are different from the human. That is basically known as the Turing test, and that probably we can say is the beginning of the modern computer science, because after that the most of the development in computer science has happened post 1950s. In 1956, there was the concept of grammar was introduced by Chomsky, and then programming languages, all the software started to emerge because it heavily depends on the concept of grammar. Without grammar, you cannot think of a language. And then nowadays there has been a sharp growth if you see over the years. So that 1950, this particular test, you can say it is a kind of test related to the artificial intelligence, because the test was targeted to understand how a machine behaves compared to a human. So that was the study. So now when we talk about the conversations, so we say that okay, when two people, two human beings are communicating with each other, their communication happens through the languages that each of them understands very well. If you talk to your friends and if you talk to him or her in a mathematical notations, okay, your friend will not be able to interpret it. So it will be very hard for him. So at first, he or she will have to understand, decode your kind of mathematical notations, and then they will have to understand your the underlying meaning, which is really not very flexible and also has a lot of challenges. So the actual conversation happens between and is effective if the conversation happens in the language that both of them are comfortable with. So this conversation that how can you make, let's say now, what do you mean by the conversational AI systems? Now, if the conversation is happening between a human and the machine, then the machine should be enabled with the intelligence like a human being. The machine should be able to understand the input coming from the speakers, should be able to interpret those, and should be able to respond to the queries. Okay, that is what we mean by the conversational artificial intelligence based systems. And nowadays we use these in our everyday life. So, for example, some of the conversational AI systems are the phone-based personal assistants like Siri, Cortana, Google Now. Or let's say if you want to talk to your car, communicating with the robots, clinical uses of mental health, chat for fun. So all these are actually the examples for conversational AI systems. And the most simplest form of conversational AI system is the chatbot. Okay, the chatbot is a more common name, and probably you have used it in many different forms. Now, if you look into the impact of the chatbot, why chatbot is important, if you see that now some of the statistics I show here, in 2019, the market size will grow. It shows that from 2019 it is $2.6 billion, and by 2024 it is expected that mm, the market size of chatbot will grow up to $9.4 billion. It's a huge market. Then by 2022, most of the banks, at almost 90%, will automate their interactions with the customers using the chatbot. Then it also shows that in business, 80% of the people actually want a kind of chatbot for the automations and the communications. And there are more than 300,000 chatbots in many for different applications are nowadays available. And why it is impactful? Because if we, it has been shown in the survey that 50% of the customers expect that a business should be open 24 by 7. Now, if a particular customer care center uh, mm, wants to be open for this 24 by 7, and if we have to employ the people, and the person will have to sit for these 24 by 7 hours to respond to the queries of the customers. So now, in place of the human, if you can deploy a machine, a computer systems that will, let's say, in the late night or the late hours, in the off times, probably the machine will handle all the queries. Then it will be more flexible. So, because of that reason, I think some kind of automations is playing an important role. And it is also the case that 30% cases, 30% of the times, 30% of the efforts can be saved using the chatbots, the human efforts basically. So all these are the different statistics that show that chatbot is really nowadays very important, and it has a lot of impact in our everyday life. Okay, starting from the e-commerce to the health, to the mental counseling, for example, in e-commerce, whether to shop a particular product, whether to get a particular service, and talking to the customer care systems, using the bot, or managing your day-to-day routine, for example, using the simple app that may be installed in your Android, for example, that will keep on reminding you about your different activities and will suggest you about different timings. Okay, so all these are the applications of chatbot in our life. Now, if we look into this chatbot, so this is not very new because it started in 1960 at MIT lab in US. So the experiment was conducted at MIT. And at that time, the chatbot was not based on a lot of AI based or machine learning based techniques, but it was mostly like a kind of knowledge based or the database oriented systems. So what we mean by the database oriented systems is that you have to keep a database of all the possible responses. After we get a query from the users, you have to select one of the responses. Now, if you want to select the responses, the most suitable response from the stored response in the database, this kind of systems are known as the knowledge-based systems, and it will always give you the set of answers from the known set of answers. It cannot generate anything new dynamically. Okay. So, but nowadays the chatbot is different. The conversational systems are different. Okay, we have to understand more compared to this. It is not like simply booking a railway ticket or airline ticket or playing a movie song. If you ask to play a movie song. Rather, nowadays chatbot should be more human-like. So what do you mean by the more human-like is that if you talk to your friend, and if your friend, let's say, is not in a good mood, you have to understand that from the conversation that your friend probably is not in a good mood, and there is a reason behind that. And what is the reason, that also you have to understand. Then it will be an effective communications conversation with your friend. Otherwise, if your friend let's say has been successful in something or has failed in something, and if you are not able to interpret that, if you are not able to understand that, if you are not attending to that, then the conversations will not sustain for a long time. That happens in our everyday life. When you talk to the persons, if you say that okay, they are my friends, we don't, and it is true that we don't call everyone as our friend. Who is your friend? Because the people who actually understand your concerns, who feel proud in your achievement, who feel, let's say, compassionate when you are not successful, and who are eager to help you in all kinds of situations. So they become your friend. But everyday life also you income you probably come across many other people who may not be a slope very close to you, because probably those relations are not sustainable for a long and long time. The communications, the communications the communications with the machine should be also like this. If you talk to a chatbot, and if your chatbot is not behaving like your friend, then probably you may not like to continue talking to the bot, right? The most important part is that bot will have to understand your mood, the speaker's mood, will have to understand the speaker's, let's say, mental states, the happiness, sorrow, disgust, etc. Okay, so that part is very important. So this we have to actually learn. Okay, and this actually we want to mimic through the human conversations. So now how can we achieve it? So how can we make our chatbot very strong, that will actually understand the human's moods, human sentiment, human's emotions? So that for that we need a lot of sophisticated techniques on natural language processing, sophisticated techniques of artificial intelligence, the sophisticated techniques of machine learning. So all those will be important to incorporate all these human-like behavior into a machines. Okay. So what nowadays we expect is that we expect that a bot should understand the human sentiment, should understand the human emotions. Now, what do you mean by the sentiment? That it is a kind of, you can say that humans mental states, you can say. Okay. Then there should be a kind of you have to understand the user's need, the context, and the mood also. And the most important part is that there should be a balancing between the specificity and the empathy. Now, what do you mean by the specificity? What do you mean by the empathy? The specificity is that, let's say, if you are talking to a bot, and if your target is to book a airlines ticket, and if you're asking for the availability of ticket between the source and the destinations, the bot should be able to respond to that very quickly. That is the specificity. So for the particular cause for which you want to interact with the bot should be able to respond to that. And at the same time, it should be empathetic. What is the empathetic? Let's say if you are trying to book a ticket between the source and the destinations, but there is no ticket available. So maybe as a customer, you feel you are not in happier mood now because your travel maybe was very essential and you are not finding a suitable flight between the source and the destinations. Now, when the bot converses with you, the bot will have to understand that probably your mood is not good because you could not be able to book the ticket for which actually started discussing with the bot. So the bot will have to automatically give you some solutions. Okay, it will have to. Bot should be able to suggest you that okay, between the source and destination there is no direct flight is available, but there is nothing to be worried because there is another way of reaching to the destination from the source, let's say via another cities. So this kind of interactions, the conversation should take place, and at the end, as a customer, okay, as a customer, you should be feel pleased after interacting with the bot. So this is what is the empathy. So the bot will have to understand your concerns, your mood, and then it will have to behave accordingly. So this is what we mean by the balancing the human-like aspects like specificity and the empathy. And all these are possible because of the development of AI, machine learning, natural language processing. Now, if you want to make AI a powerful so that it can engage into a human-like conversations, then the Facebook AI has identified five important properties. On is the consistency. So consistency means the bot should be able to generate the answers without any misstepping. Misstepping means what? Without any contradiction. That means if the bot is responding to a query, and if you are asking, let's say, about the availability of the tickets between any two particular cities, and the bot in one time says that there is no train available between the source and the destination, and the another user, let's say, when it starts interacting, if the bot says no, there are trains available, then it becomes inconsistent because for the same query, it actually generates different kind of answers. So that is not possible. So this you have to avoid. So it should be consistent. Then the specificity, as I mentioned, that for the very specific purpose for which you are actually conversing with the bot, it should be able to respond to. Then the empathy is very important, as I mentioned, that affect awareness like sentiment aware, emotion aware, courteousness. So all these are the very important properties. Okay, so we'll discuss about that. And also sometimes the bot should be able to understand the background knowledge. The let's say if you say that why 2nd October is important in India, and then if the bot is knowledgeable, somehow if it knows that 2nd October is the birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, so it is very important day. So that becomes the knowledgeable. So that means the knowledge is not there in the machine. It is available in the outside world. Whether the machine will be able to capture those kind of knowledge. So that becomes the knowledgeability. And the multimodal understanding is basically when you talk to the bot, will not only converts using the text, but we converts using the text, image, audio, and video in all kinds of conversations are possible. And nowadays is very important because multimedia sources of information from different forums are very important. Now let's see that if we talk about this chatbot, so there are two kinds of chatbots are available. One is that open chit chat chatbot, where a particular bot should be able to dynamically adapt to the new environment, new situations, and the bot should be able to give you answers under different situations. For example, if you are asking for, let's say, sometimes for a movie ticket, sometimes you are asking for the airlines ticket, sometimes you are asking for, let's say, railway ticket. So the bot is actually being asked different kinds of questions that is related to the different kinds of domains. So these are all known as the open chit chat bot or open chit chat dialogue agent. And this is very difficult. It is not very easy yet. But the other one is the task oriented dialogue agent. What happens in the task oriented dialogue agent is that the chatbot will be designed for performing a specific task. Let's say if you want to design a chatbot for the airlines ticket reservations, so then it should be able to perform only that task. It will not be able to perform the tasks of movie ticket booking. Okay. So this is what is the task-oriented dialogue agent. So there is a very specific task for which it is built and it will perform that particular task. Now, if you compare these, that open chit chat versus the task-oriented dialogue agent. So task-oriented dialogue agent is obviously uh, um, uh, is a bit easier to implement compared to the open chit chat agent, because open chit chat agent is more difficult to implement. Then there are so now if we talk about the different components of the conversational systems, or if you want to develop it, if you want to implement it, so what are the basic components? The basic components are these three one, that natural language understanding is a component, dialogue management is another component, and natural language generation is the third component. Now, if it is a kind of, let's say, the automatic speech recognitions, text to speech synthesis, these are the two modules that is related to the speech. Let's say if you are speaking, the ASR accepts that particular speech, converts into text. Text goes as an input to the NLU. NLU does a lot of processing like intent detection, like slot filling, etc. Then the dialogue management comes. Now in dialogue management, there will be a lot of semantic processing, and then from the dialogue management, there will be natural language generations. And from these natural language generated text, there will be text to speech synthesis. That means, again, you have to convert this text into the audio. But if it is only, this is a kind of speech to speech communications. But if it is only text to text communications, then you don't need these automatic speech recognitions or text to speech synthesis part. Okay. So now in my talk, actually, I will discuss only in this last component, that is the natural language generation part. And as you can see from this particular figure, that natural language generation is closely tied with this dialogue management, because the output of dialogue manager goes to the natural language generation module. So that part is very important. So what do we mean by this? So in the dialogue management, basically, what happens is that you can say it is a kind of content planning. So what is the content planning? If you have, let's say, if you're asking a questions and if you have multiple answers to produce. Now, finally, which answer to be produced? That selection is basically the content planning. And finally, once the sentence, the response is generated, that response is a kind of, you can say it is a kind of sentence realizations. Okay, so you can say the dialogue management is basically the task is what to say, that what answers to produce, and the natural language generation deals with how to say it. Okay, that how to produce the answers. That is basically the sentence realizations. Now, for example, if the question user asks that book a flight from Kolkata to Delhi, and the system says that can you please specify the date of travel? Okay, so that can be the bot's response. Now, probably when you ask that book a flight from Kolkata to Delhi, if the system ha can produce a number of answers, and then let's say there are three possible answers possible, and out of those three, the bot has selected these particular answers, like can you please specify the date of travel? So this is done by the content planners or the dialogue managers. And this particular way that you are writing these expressions, how to present to the user, that is the natural language generation, which is very important task in natural language processing. So now, if we talk about that empathetic dialogue agent or empathetic conversational AI systems, what do you mean by that? So this is an example. So let's say that the speaker says that I finally got promoted today at work. Now the listener, let's say it is a bot. If the bot says that why would anyone promote you, then the speaker will not feel very happy because the speaker has been promoted, so he or she is very happy, and he or she is actually wants to share that particular happiness with a bot or let's say to a person. And the bot is not, bot's response is very mechanical, and also the bot is not appreciating the achievement by the speakers. So this response will make the speaker very will be very problematic for the speaker, and surely the speaker would not like to continue the conversation anymore with this particular listeners. But let's say if the listener here, which is can be the bot, if the bot responds like this, congrats, that is great, then the speaker feels that okay, that this particular bot is acknowledging the particular achievement of the speaker, and so the speaker will feel happy, and the speaker will continue conversing with this particular listener. So this happens in our day-to-day life every day, right? If you closely see that the person with whom you talk more, who understands your feelings basically. So this actually we want to get from a machines. Can we make our machines so powerful that the machine will understand our own feeling, and accordingly it will start interacting. Okay. So this is very important in our day-to-day conversations. Now, one of the very important one of the very important work that we had done in 2019 is that we tried to introduce the we try to introduce the courteousness or the politeness using the AI, natural language processing, and machine learning into the bot. And why it is important, why courteousness or the politeness is important. Again, this is a very, in our everyday life, always you have noticed that we have to maintain the politeness in our day-to-day life. So let's say if you're talking to your parents or if you talk to your teachers, for example, and if you talk to your friend or talk to your junior, the way you converse with these different group of people are different. Now, think about a situation of a customer care. If you are, let's say, using a mobile connectivity of any company X, for example, and if you are frequently getting call drop, and then you are annoyed, so you might have called to the customer care. And when you talk to the customer care agent, if the agent does not understand your concerns or is not taking care of your problems, then as a customer, you feel very disturbed, and also you may feel to disconnect that particular service and to take another mobile connections. So this is only for one of the, let's say, in case of mobile connection, but in our day-to-day life it happens everywhere. Let's say you are going to a particular restaurant, and once you see that someday maybe the food is not very good, if you complain it to the manager and the manager says that no, okay, is not listening to you, is not giving attention to your comments, then again you may not visit the same restaurant again in futures. And also maybe you will not recommend it to your friends, to your colleagues, and to your other relatives. So that can cause huge loss sometimes to the business community. So that is the reason why, particularly when you deal with the customers, any business houses, they have to be very cordial to the customers. They will have to be very compassionate with the customers. They will have to understand the customer's problem, and then accordingly they have to respond. So now here, the customer care agent, we are talking about not the human. So let's say now if it is a machine now, okay, then the machine has to behave like a human. It has to behave with politeness. It has to be courteous. But how the machine will understand it? As a human being, I understand, you can understand that when you have to be polite, okay, depending upon if the customer is very angry, very upset, so you have to cool down the customers. But can a machine do that? This kind of situation. This actually we tried to solve using the deep learning, using the natural language processing techniques. Okay. So what we did is that idea is that you have to uh, transform a generic chatbot response into a courteous response or the politest response. As a domain, as I mentioned, it is the customer care in the Twitter. And why it is important, probably that also you might have already gotten an idea why courteousness in a customer care situations is very important. Our ultimate purpose of such kind of system is that it should increase the satisfactions of the customers to build the customer relations. So this is very important, and you have to continue these relations for a long time. Okay, the continuations is playing an important role. Now, let us see that how did we get this part when we talk about this courteousness. So courteousness is coming from the concept of politeness theory, and the politeness theory was introduced in 1987 by Brown and Levinson. Okay, so what do you mean by this politeness? Politeness is basically courteousness is to show the politeness in one person's attitude towards the others. So, for example, if person X is talking to person Y, then how you behave with person Y, that is indicators of the politeness. For example, if you complain about a bad meal, and as I mentioned in the restaurant, you have gone to a restaurant and then probably the food quality is not good in a particular day, you are not happy, you complain to the manager and the manager is not attending to you, and the manager says that okay, why you are complaining, our restaurant is very good, so I think you don't have a good taste. And if you get this kind of behavior, so you feel very bad. But the good manager, what they do is that once the customer complains, immediately they give lot of attention to the complaint. Okay, they apologize to the customer. They say sorry to the customer for this kind of bad taste, and then they say okay, that sometimes they even don't take the money for that particular dinner or for that particular lunch. So now at the end, what you say is that if this is the good behavior that you are getting from the manager, or even if the food quality was not experienced, probably we will not reveal all these informations to the outside. You will not tell your friends that okay, don't visit that particular restaurant. They don't serve the good food. You will not be able. You will not communicate this message in your network, in your peers, and also maybe in future you will try to visit that particular restaurant. So this is very important when you talk about the businesses and when the customer interactions is playing a role. Now, what is politeness? So politeness can appear in many different ways. Typically, we have the positive politeness and the negative politeness. These are the two different kinds of politeness possible. Now, what do we mean by the positive politeness? Positive politeness is, let's say, you are talking with your friends in a meeting, and there are five, six people are discussing. And if you say something, and maybe your friends are also the other partners in the meeting, the other participants in the meeting are also agreeing or also in consensus to what you are speaking. So, and that you can immediately notice from their facial expressions, okay, that they are agreeing to whatever you are saying. So this is a kind of the positive politeness. So that means what is happening is that there is a common consensus and the discussions is very friendly. That can be one of the ways how the politeness can be expressed. The other one is the negative politeness. Negative politeness can be the advice giving. Let's say you are saying something to your teachers, to your parents, for example, and probably your parents are not agreeing to whatever you are demanding to them. So they are giving some advices. Let's say if you don't want to study, if you are saying that okay, after let's say your 10 plus 2, you don't want to do your bachelor's or master's. Maybe if you discuss with your parents that you have some other career options in your life, you want to go in business or so. Your parents may not like that many times. So they will suggest you that okay, they will tell you that okay, whatever you are saying, probably we don't agree with it, and you can easily notice that kind of disagreement. Okay, from the listeners. Okay, when you speak to them, you can clearly visualize that. Okay, that is agreement, and your parents might give you some advices. They will not approve whatever you are saying, and all these aspects are basically the negative politeness. So in this case, what is happening is that even if the listener is not agreeing to whatever you are speaking, but they are responding in such a manner that it is very polite. So politely they are saying that, okay, no, whatever you are saying is not good. We don't agree with that. Even to your friends, for example, in a meeting, even if you are meeting with your friends and there are many people communicating in the meeting, all the statements that a particular person is giving may not be acceptable by the others. But that non-acceptability does not mean the showing of the rudeness. It can be expressed in a more polite fashion. That even if I don't agree, that can be expressed in a polite way. So that is very important. So positive politeness, negative politeness, these two factors are very important. And then there can be the less polite and the more polite. When it is less polite, when you, let's say, talk to your friends, okay, talk to your juniors, but if you talk to, let's say, your seniors, to your teachers, then you have to be more polite. If you have made a mistakes, you have to be apologetic. Okay, you cannot force anything. If your friend is saying something, you have to appreciate that. You have to thank them. So these are all the more polite strategies that could happen. Now let us see that what happens in the customer care situations. In this case, you can see that from the left and the right, there are two situations. There is an interactions between, this is the bot, this at the rate 115719 is the ID of the bot. And here is a person who is having some problem. And the person is complaining that, okay, I am having the worst luck with your customer service. Now the bot is saying, how can you help? So rather than saying this, if you look into the right hand side, if the bot says that, okay, help has arrived, we are sorry to see that you are having trouble, how can we help? Now compare the response given in the left part here and the response in the right part here. You see the response in the right part is more engaging. Why it is more engaging? Because here the bot is able to understand that the person has lot of troubles and the person has contacted the customer service and his or her experience with the customer service has not been good. Okay, so if the response is like this, as it's shown in the right hand side, then the customer feel more satisfied, right? And as it feels more, as they feel more satisfied, so they'll continue taking that particular service. So this is very important that rather than this mechanical response, if the response is like this, then it becomes more engaging. And this part, the colored part, make this particular response more courteous, more polite. Then the other example, let's say again another situations. Again, a particular person is having some problem about a radio, and he or she has contacted the bot, and the bot is saying, "Can you send us a screenshot of what you are seeing? We would like to take a close look." Rather than saying that, if the bot says that, okay, hey Craig, now Craig is the name of the particular person who has contacted, help is here. So this help is here is very important term. So that actually pleases the customer that, okay, the bot is trying to help us. The particular agent is trying to help us. And in the last case, if you see that rather than happy listening, if the bot says, okay, no worries at all for anything else, we are just a tweet away. So this particular part is again is making these conversations more engaging. So this is very important in the day-to-day life. So there are many other examples. For example, in this case, you are expressing some kind of assurance because you are saying rather than the person has a trouble contacting, he or she has contacted to the bot is saying that what trouble are you having. Rather than this, if the bot is saying that, okay, we will look into this with you and see what is going on. So this part is giving more assurance to the customers. So all these situations are playing a very, very important role. And what we did is that when we tried to implement it in any machine learning system, the one of the fundamental requirement is lot of data, right? Particularly if you are dealing with the deep learning based system, you need lot of data. And for this particular implementation, so that to make the bot uh, uh, be able to converse with politeness, this kind of data was not available. So what we did is that we collected the data from the tweet conversations, and the tweet conversation was not related to the polite or impolite, rather it was a simple conversations of the customers and the agent and for the different companies. Now we had to annotate this data with the politeness, impoliteness, emotions, all these things. And when we tried to create the data using the politeness, there are many challenges, as I mentioned, because politeness can vary across the age groups. When, so you have to ensure that if you talk to a older people, you have to be more polite. If you talk to a female person, you have to be more polite, right? If you but if you talk to your friends, for example, you may not be so much polite. If you talk to your junior, you may not be so much polite. So also the politeness can so politeness can vary across the genders. It depends heavily on the age group. Politeness also depends on the culture and also the geographical locations. The level of politeness that Indians have and the levels of politeness that, let's say, Western world believe, they are completely different. Now, if you go to the Japan, for example, their politeness level is completely different from us and the European countries and the Western US, for example. So that means this is a very hard problem, okay? That incorporating politeness, because politeness also depends on different factors. And also the machine will also have to understand that under what situations the bot will have to be polite. Every situation you cannot be, if it is simple, let's say if you are asking, is there any internet in the area to the bot? And the bot in this moment is not needed to be polite. You are asking for a simple informations, and the bot should be able to tell, okay, the internet is available or not available. So in this case, there is no need to be polite. But if the customer says that, okay, I have been trying for a lot to get some support from you, but I'm sorry to say that your service is very poor. If you say like this, now immediately bot will have to understand that now the customer is angry, disgusted. So the bot will have to understand it. Automatically, uh, it has to introduce some kind of politeness into the responses. So that is another thing. So understanding the human's emotions, the mental state, and then decide whether to incorporate the politeness or not. Okay. So these are all the challenges. So we created the data by clustering, by kind of embedding, And then we identified what can be the polite, what can be the impolite, under what situations the bot will have to be polite, under what situations the bot may not be needed to be polite. So all these situations we have deeply understood, we have deeply studied, and finally we built a lot of data. So all this data known as the conversational data, where we can see that if two people are talking to each other, it form a conversations, right? Though, and these conversations, uh, each conversation is consisting of set of utterances we call. For example, I am asking a questions to you, that becomes an utterance. You are responding, that becomes another utterance. And this the conversation, let's say, continues for let's say 5 minutes or 2 minutes. So in the 2 minutes, whatever discussion has taken place between you and me, that forms the whole conversations. And in every conversations, whatever utterances we have spoken, okay, whatever I have spoken, whatever you have spoken, all these become the utterances. Okay, so now how would we build this model? So this model is based on the deep learning. So if you look into the left part, so left part is a kind of uh, the bidirectional recurrent neural network, which is bidirectional gated recurrent unit. Okay, what it does is that it captures all these utterances individually. So let's say this is the first utterance that have been spoken, this is the second one, this is the third one. So like this, in the whole dialogue, in the whole conversations, if there are, let's say, 20 different utterances, so all these 20 different utterances will have to be encoded. These are known as the encoding. It has to be encoded using a recurrent neural network. In this case, it is a gated recurrent unit. And all these gated recurrent unit are arranged in a hierarchical fashions. That means you have one layer of GRU, then on top of that you have another layer, on top of that you have another layer. So like this and this. And finally, we generate a conversational context vectors. Okay. Now this conversational context vectors is basically creating a kind of what does this vector represent? The vector represents the whole history. Okay. And if you see this different hierarchy, and probably, so may I know that whether RNN is covered? So, madam, are you there? Recurrent neural network and all these things are covered.
So not in detail, only the terminology has been used.
Okay, okay, okay. So this recurrent neural network learns in a sequence. Okay, uh, and what it does is that, for example, if you look into this lower part, the utterance is why did not you, and then there will be some other words. So now this why at time, let's say time zero, you have inputted this particular word. In time one, you have inputted this did not. In time three, you have inputted this. So you, for example, like this. The information flows from the left to right directions, and also it is bidirectional. It can also move from the right to the left. So in this way, when you reach here, let's say this captures this whole information of this whole sentence. So in the last state, let's say at time t, when you are at time t, at that point, that particular recurrent unit. So recurrent unit We can say it is a kind of it can store the informations. Okay, it has a memory like the register. Probably in digital logic, you have heard of the registers. You can say it is a kind of register that is storing the informations. So in this case, the whole information is stored here. Okay, so like every utterance is passed through a set of recurrent unit connections, and the last unit stores the whole information that it has seen so far. So in this way, all the utterances are passed in different recurrent neural network. They are being represented, captured into this last hidden state, we call it. These are known as the sentence encoding. So sentence encoding is basically a vector of real numbers, and this vector will represent this whole sentence. This vector will represent this whole utterance. This vector will represent this whole utterance. And then you basically pass them one after other and create a conversational context vectors. This conversational context vectors is basically is passed to the encoder. Okay, as you can see here, these are known as the encoder. And this left part, again in neural network there is a concept of encoder decoder model. Okay, so encoder decoder model is a kind of, we can, it has a lot of similarity with the cryptography. In cryptography, when you send the message, let's say to make it more secured, we encode the messages, and in the time of, let's say, receiver, there should be a decoder that will decrypt that particular message. So in this case of machine learning, it is also a kind of encoder decoder. This encoder model encodes this whole message, and the decoder will decode this particular message. Okay, so that means what this encoder does, the encoder encodes the generic response, and the decoder will have to make it polite. That is the idea. So you encode it, you know that the whole conversational context vector, and then you have to decode it. So that is the typically how encoder decoder works. So it has a lot of theories. Probably I don't have time to cover all these things, but you can say that, okay, this encoder encodes the whole conversational context that you have spoken so far, and it transfers to the output, and we are trying to make the output more polite. And then there is a concept of reinforcement learning to make it more fine-tuned. Okay, so you have to take get a feedback from the output, and using the feedback you have to refine it. Okay, refine the representations, refine all the phenomena. Okay, so that is how it is done in encoder decoder with encoder decoder model, and encoder decoder with a kind of uh, encoder decoder and this reinforcement learning. So now maybe I can skip this part because reinforcement learning needs the another discussions. Now, after developing this model, so there are many issues to decide how the evaluations, are actually done. These are all the standard matrices, like whether the content is properly preserved, whether the emotional accuracy is, let's say, content preservation means what? Once you generate the polite responses, you have to ensure that the original purpose for which you are communicating, that should not be lost. Emotional accuracy should tell you that how good is the generated response. Fluency will tell you that if you have generated a response, whether it is grammatically correct or not. Okay, so these are all the matrices, the evaluation parameters by which actually we have evaluated the models. And there are a lot of analysis we have seen, like for example, the blue is a measures, okay, that measures the quality of the output. Rouge is another evaluation metric used in summarizations technique. Perplexity, content preservations, emotional accuracy. So all these parameters we had used, and then we have evaluated your models. Now I'll briefly talk about another work, which is persona-aware response generation with emotions. Okay, so why it is important, the persona-aware response generations? Because personality plays an important role, and every person has different emotions, right? So for example, if you compare any two persons, you'll see that their emotional emotional states are not same. The way person X behaves, person Y will not behave exactly in the similar way, and that can happen everywhere. For example, the situations for which probably I react, in those situations maybe you may not react, like okay, or in the situations where you react so badly, maybe I may not react. So this depends on different mental states of the individuals. So that means what, your personality is playing a very important role, and it is driven by, personality is often driven by the emotions. Okay, so for example, this, why is this personality important? Again, uh, forget about this chatbot, forget about these conversational systems. You think about in our real life, and again, you think about your network in social media, your network, your Facebook friends, for example, or let's say your colleagues, your friends, and you see that there's friendship, okay, your network, based on some commonalities, common personal characteristics. At first, you look into the profile of a particular person's, and if you find it interesting, if it matches your interest somehow, and then actually you tempted to interact with that particular persons. This happens in social media. This happens in our real life also. So all these conversations, the communications is heavily driven by. Yes, is there any questions? Hello? Hmm. Uh, hello? Is heavily driven by the personality. Okay. And if you know the personality, it becomes, the communications becomes more authentic. It becomes more genuine. Okay. It actually builds the trust in the communications. Okay, and the trust is very important. It builds the confidence. If I know the person X, if I know the person X personality, I interact with that particular persons, and knowing that personality builds a lot of trust and confidence in the communications. Otherwise, I will not be very much confident in sharing all my informations. A bot is also like this. Let's say if you have a bot and you want to interact with the bot with your particular problem, okay, and then if you are not very much sure about the privacy preservations, about the confidentiality, then you may not be able to discuss everything with the bot. You may not be able to reveal all your personal informations with the bot. You will not be able to share your problems. But once you know that the machine with which you are communicating is can preserve your privacy, it will not reveal the information outside, then you are more confident, and then only you can engage into a lot of conversations with that particular machines. This happens in many situations. Let's say in our case also, at our place we are building a chatbot that can help the women and the child to deal with the mental trauma or that might have caused due to the abuses, let's say cyberbullying or harassment in the workplaces or harassment in the colleges, harassment in any sectors. So the idea, this is a kind of Ministry of Home Affairs project. So we are trying to build a model, the bot, because under such situations, many times the children or the women don't talk to their families, or in many times they hesitate to go to take the legal help. So what we have been doing is that can a counseling bot be placed over there, which will actually try to understand the concerns of the victims and then can suggest them in a more secured environment. So that is the idea. So in this case, understanding the personalizations will play an important role. So what we mean by the personalization, let's say how it actually happens in the real scenario in when we try to implement it. You see that this is persona 1 and persona 2. These are the examples of two persons. What they are saying is this. Persona 1 saying that as a child I own a national spelling bee. So this is the description, the personal profiles of person 1. This is some profile information of person 2. And after knowing these, they have engaged into an interactions. Person 1 is saying, person 2 is saying, person 1 again is saying something, person 2 is responding. Now, if you very closely look into the questions of person 1, what person was says? Person was says that, okay, hi, I work as a gourmet cook. Now, what person 2 is responding? Person 2 is saying that I don't like carrots, I throw them away. Okay. Now, you can easily see that person 1, when it says this, okay, because person 1 is basically um, person 1 is a cook and person 2 is more the sports lover. He's saying that I am very athletic, I have brown hair, I love bicycling, I hate carrots. Now, if person 2 is saying immediately in response to this that I don't like carrots, I throw them away. So this response might not be very pleasant for person 1. Because person 1 itself himself is a cook, and the person 2 immediately saying that he or she dislike carrots and I throw them away. This is a very hard statement. So now if the response of person 2 is like this, so that will lose the connections after a certain time, and they will not be able to communicate with each other for a long time. But let's say if the person 2 responds like this, when person 1 says that I am a gourmet cook, and person 2 says that okay, that is a great job. So that is a great job. So this particular segment pleases person 2, pleases person 1, or gives more satisfaction to person 1, that yes, indeed person 2 has realized and person 2 is appreciative that person 1 is the cook. And then also he or she says that okay, but I don't like carrots and throw them away. That is okay. But this first part gives more satisfaction to person 2. So how to incorporate this kind of emotional expressions into the model? So that is basically very important. Okay. And again, we had used the deep learning based model for both the problems. So I am not going into details of that. Maybe I can skip it. And then we have created a lot of data, did a lot of experiments, etc. And then you can see that these are all the responses that our bot is actually creating. Okay. The last one is basically now why multimodality is important. Let's say so far we have been discussing only for the textual input, but what will happen if the input is coming in the form of an image? Because nowadays in social media also you might have seen that in Facebook, rather than writing, we post our images or let's say audios, videos, etc. So that has that has become a kind of mode of communications. So because of these multimodal sources of informations, bot should also be able to deal with these multimodal information sources. Let's say the information is also coming from the video, information is also coming from the audio. So how can the bot interact with all such situations? So that is basically is the goal of multimodal dialogue systems. So here the aim, why it is important. So if you look into the lower part here, that the speaker has said, has written, let's say written text, thanks for putting me on hold. I have all the time in the world. Now, what kind of sentiment it is, whether it is positive, whether it is negative, what kind of sentiment? If you see the sentiment, if you only this text is presented before you, the sentiment here is positive because of thanks is a positive word, right? So machine will not be able to understand with a lot of surety that this particular utterance is actually is spoken in a negative sense, because you are saying thanks for putting me on hold, I have all the time in the world. So it is a kind of sarcasm, even if thanks is a word. But the speaker, when the speaker has spoken this or a speaker has written this, uh, his or her intention was not very positive, but it was a negative. He wanted to say something negative. But how do we understand this? Only from this written statement. It is very difficult for the machines. But when the machine will be able to do it, let's say, if the audio is available, audio means when the speaker has spoken, the audio is available. When the writer was writing this, his video is available. If the video is available, then his or her visual expressions, facial expression, eye movement. If the audio is available, then the intensity of the audio, the pitch, the tone, etc. So all these will play a very, very crucial role in saying that even if there is a word thanks here, but the ultimately the sentiment here is negative and not the positive. That is the reason why, along with the text, if you give this audio as well as the video, then probably finally this classifications will be perfect. This is why the multimodal sentiment analysis helps, and we build the models using sentiment and emotions, aware multimodal dialogue data sets. So these are some of the conversations you can see that we had all. This is a conversation going on between the different people. And what is sentiment? Sentiment is basically you have to know that given this particular text, whether it is positive, negative, or neutral. And what is the emotions? Emotion is more fine-grained. You have to say whether it is disgusting, whether it is surprising, whether it is joy, whether it is happy. What kind of? There are six basic emotions. Okay, so with this again, the data was not there, so we collected the videos that from the different TV shows, 10 famous TV shows. These are the shows names. Okay, drama, comedy we have considered. And then we have done a lot of video processing, we have done a lot of audio processing, we have created the data like this. Okay, so from the different sources, and finally we have ultimately uh, done a lot of evaluations, lot of model building again using deep learning. But now again, this is not only text, but you can see this video is also an input, this audio is also an input. So this model is capturing the information from the text, from the video, from the audio, and then it is responding something. So that is the idea. Okay. So probably if you are interested, so you can look into our publication. So maybe I can skip that, and then maybe we can discuss now. So what we have presented here is that we have seen that courteousness, politeness is very important, empathy is very important in conversational AI. We have also understood what we mean by the personalizations. And also we have seen that if you have the multimodal sources of information in the form of image, audio, video, along with the text, then how to actually deal with such situations. Now, at IIT Patna, we are doing particularly lot of works in this particular domain. For example, we are actually creating a chatbot called as Sevak in Indian languages, in Hindi, in Bangla, in Telugu, in English, and also the code mix language. So code mix means mixing of more than one languages. Let's say, and this is very common among the Indian populations. Let's say if my mother tongue is Bengali, so when you write in English, if I don't find a suitable word in the English, I immediately try to borrow it from the original Bengali. That happens. So in our writing, when you write in social media, you might have noticed that this phenomena is common. So if the Hindi speaker has a tendency to borrow some words from Hindi and write it in English. So these are all known as the code mixing. So we are developing this chatbot for the railway domain, for the healthcare, and for the judiciary domain. And we have been able to integrate it using WhatsApp, using Facebook, using web interfacing, etc. Along with that, we are also doing a lot of works with the different companies like Accenture, like Samsung Research on this conversational AI, and also our students, our bachelor student, BTech students, MTech students, PhD students are working on the different problems on the dialogue systems like natural language understanding, dialogue management, natural language generation, etc. So if you have any interest, you can look into some of our papers that I have listed here. Okay, so from our group. And with that, maybe I can conclude now, but uh, I would like to take some questions from you. So if you have any questions, maybe we can discuss now. Okay, thank you.
Participants, you are invited for the questions. Any questions, please?
Thank you, sir. It was a quite interesting lecture. I want to ask one question.
Yes.
Sir, which language should we prefer for this conversational AI?
Which who is particular? Yes.
Which machine language should we prefer for this conversational AI or this natural language generation?
Or which programming language you mean?
Yes,
Hello?
which machine language?
No, machine language is different thing. So machine language, you can say probably to which machine learning algorithm you can say. So machine learning uh, machine learning algorithms. There are many algorithms, right? For example, recurrent neural network. I spoke. This recurrent neural network I have spoken about. So RNN is very useful. So, but machine level language means we are not building a compiler here. Okay, so machine level language comes into the compiler. When you try to build a compiler, then the source language, machine language, etc. comes. So it is a recurrent neural network, and the Python programming language is very important.
Thank you,
Any
sir.
other?
Thank you, sir. I think there are no more questions from the participant side. Thank you very much for giving us time for this wonderful session. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.